I always enjoy coming out to the garden of Olen and Theresa Thomas here in Stillwater. Now, Olen and Theresa have been Oklahoma gardening ambassadors for the last 15 years, and we really enjoy having Olen and Theresa in our program. Well, today we're going to look around the garden of Olen and Theresa, and Olen is going to give us a tour. Hey, Olen, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Steve. Welcome back.
All right, it's always great to come out here.
Good.
So, Olen, you guys have been gardening on this site here for a number of years, and I just want to ask you, what is it that you enjoy most about gardening?
Well, as you mentioned, we've been here for 19 years. We've lived in a couple of other places, but gardening seems to be what we really enjoy. I guess if I think back when I was just old enough to remember, my grandmother gardened. We raised a lot of our own food. I hated it at the time, of course. And then, of course, my mother had her own garden, and she still tries to raise quite a few flowers. It's just sort of in my blood, I guess. The actual growing of things just seems to really excite me, so we have a good time doing it.
Okay, well, I can tell you spend a lot of time out here. The place looks great, and every time I come out, I'm just overwhelmed by all the different plants and all the unique specimens and the different species of things you have out here. Like this tree right here. What have we got, Olen?
Well, this is the Catalpa tree. The cross, it's kind of an intergenetic cross that was made in Siberia many years ago, and then finally made it to the market. There are even some named cultivars. This one is unnamed. But it's the cross between the desert willow and the catalpa tree.
Okay.
And I like the flower because it's blooming a little late this year because we had that freeze at Easter, but it has these nice clusters of petunia type flowers on it, and goes through waves of bloom. Pretty soon you can come out here and the ground will just be covered with these spent flowers. It's just beautiful. And then in about 3 weeks you get another flush of the same thing. It just keeps recycling through that. Blooms all summer.
All right, a plant that is sterile because it is a hybrid, so
right.
It's not producing any seed, so it just keeps on flowering.
That's right.
Okay. Well, around your property you have these long curving borders on both sides of your property, and then you have a lot of island beds in the lawn here of your place. And in this particular border, you've got a mix of shrubs and perennials, and most visual right now are the mulleins.
Yeah, aren't these beautiful? This is the, it's an introduced plant that's kind of naturalized all over the country, Verbascum thapsus. And it's very statuesque. Some people consider it a weed. We really enjoy this, especially Theresa. This is one of her favorites. She wanted to be sure and have this looking good when you came out because she really likes to promote it, and it does look good.
All right, and this plant's actually a biennial?
Yes, it is. The first year it will grow from seed and you'll just get the little rosette of leaves. The second year you get the flower stalk and it looks magnificent, and then that particular plant dies, but we just kind of let it reseed around. Sure. That's why it's kind of scattered the way it is, because we like that nice, tall, statuesque look in various places. And we haven't found a place we don't like it. But if it does become someplace where you don't, it's easy to weed out, so it's not a problem.
Okay, and I guess one way to control some of the seeds would be just to snip off that stalk before the seeds are ripe. Right. Okay.
Right.
I think it's a beautiful plant. It looks like a candelabra.
That's what Theresa says, and I have to agree.
Over here in the front of this bed, you have some bird of paradise shrub, and it looks like you've pruned those to sort of spread out there, but you haven't done anything that you spend a lot of time on pruning those? No,
I don't spend any time at all, except at the beginning of each year I remove the spent seed heads from last year, and there's sometimes quite a bit of freeze back on that plant. So that's really the only pruning I do. I have some in other areas of the garden that I like to keep smaller, and I do just coppice those back about 6 inches tall, and you get a flush of new growth, and you get a big, full, vigorous plant. These have more ethereal and open shape because I let them grow as a large shrub or eventually even a large tree. They'll get up to 12 foot tall if left alone. This is a little bit of a tough location here, which is why I have some of the plants in here that we're talking about, because this is pretty compacted soil, and like the mullein that we just discussed and the bird of paradise, they get no supplemental water. They're totally on their own, and they just thrive.
Good, tough plants.
You
and
bet.
of course, coppice pruning is cutting back hard, close to the ground in the spring. The bird of paradise shrub, one of the great shrubs of summer because it does flower when it's really hot. And Olen, we've got a beautiful little orange flowered plant right here. Can you tell us about this?
Well, yeah, this is a native wildflower. It's just about to go by, as you can see. Standing cypress is the common name, Ipomopsis, and it's that beautiful red color. We really like it, and we just kind of nice ferny foliage, beautiful green.
Yeah, very delicate.
I've never seen any bugs on it or any disease. It's just a real tough plant, a nice roadside native that's often used in wildflower mixes, and I highly recommend it.
Okay.
We kind of let it go to seed and let it come up wherever it wants to.
Another biennial?
Yes, indeed.
Germinates in the fall?
That's right.
Okay.
I might point out that here's an additional plant right here. You see, it's a single
Just
stalk.
One stalk?
Yeah, well, that's the way it wants to grow. But if
Okay.
you look at this one, it has multiple stalks, and the other one over here.
Looks like you pinched it.
So you get a lot more flowers.
Yeah.
Well, the deer pinched it for us, which we curse the deer regularly out here in our garden. But in this case, it worked out. After they pinched it that first time, they didn't bother it again, so you got all these seed heads. So you could take that lesson into your own garden and do a little pinching yourself and get many times the flowers that you would get if you just left the plant alone.
Okay, the deer actually did something good for us.
Yeah.
Well, Olen, as I look around here, I see a beautiful gold foliaged spirea back here. What's the selection name on that?
That's a cultivar called Mellow Yellow, and it does have the traditional pink flowers on it in the spring, but that foliage color is the reason you grow the plant right there. It looks like it will darken as you get into July and August. It'll be more green and less yellow, but for a good spring color and early summer color, it really lights up the landscape.
Okay, a very appropriately named plant. Well, I see our current Oklahoma proven tree for 2007 right here. This is the Oklahoma redbud, easy to recognize with those glossy leaves. And you do have a number of redbuds on your property, Olen?
Yes, we do. I have the Mexicana redbud, I have the Texensis redbud, and I have the Chinese redbud, which is Gigantea, because the leaves are quite a bit larger than the other cultivars. Okay. And I have the
forest pansy?
The maroon foliaged one forest pansy in the backyard, which is about the same size. It always looks good in the spring. Again, with that colored foliage, it will darken and be more green in the really hot part of the summer, but right now it's looking really good.
It is gorgeous. Well, right over here I see another Oklahoma proven plant. This is leadwort, and I usually tell people that this blooms in late summer and fall, but voila, it's flowering quite well here in sort of the late spring, right before summer. So the weather that we've had this year sometimes causes things to do different types of behavior, but a very low growing plant. But I tell people this is a good perennial, but probably best used as a ground cover, would you say?
I agree. That's why I have it here. You can see it's under planting a pretty mature pine tree. And the reason it's here is because it can compete with the tree roots of the pine tree. It does require a little bit of supplemental water, but not too much, especially if you don't want bloom.
Okay.
The foliage will still look good and make a nice, good ground cover even through the hot part of the month without too much water. But to get the flowers to bloom all summer, which it will do if you give it a little supplemental water, and everybody loves that beautiful blue color.
Yeah, I love those flowers. Well, Olen, tell me about this little display that you've got here. You got a guy listening to some headphones there and pushing a cart of wood with a child there sitting on the front.
Well, we do have scarecrows in our garden in several places, and this is a pair of them here. This represents our teenage scarecrow, hence he's got to have his private music.
Sure.
And he's pushing his sibling here in this little cart, and that's just what it represents. We change them around and change their costume and various things from year to year. These have been here about 3 years, so the neighbors walking by, we have to change the scenery now and then so that they don't get too bored.
Absolutely. And the framework inside here, what is that made of?
Well, essentially it's a stick man.
Okay.
There's a 2x2 wood framework in there, and he has movable joints so that I can put him in different positions, and you just figure out how to make him stay in the position you want, but so you can make some adjustments on them.
Lots of fun in the garden. Well, let's take a look at some of the other beds.
All right.
Well, as we mentioned earlier, here at the Thomas's property, they have these two huge borders on both sides of their property, and they're filled with trees and shrubs, perennials, annuals, grasses, almost everything. And Olen, as I look down here, I see a couple of broken urns. Was this on purpose, or was this as an accident?
Well, believe it or not, I was actually buying that urn for garden ornament, and while unloading it, I managed to break it. So being the frugal guy that I am, we decided to use it as a broken urn in the garden.
Okay, well, I think it is very tastefully displayed. Well, right here in between the halves of the urn, we have a grass that is getting kind of tossed around with our wind that's sweeping down the plain here in Oklahoma. But this is a very attractive perennial grass.
That's right. The perennial, this is Pennisetum orientale. It's the cultivar Carly Rose. And Carly Rose differs from the species because of this rosy red tinge to the seed head. So I like it very much. It blooms pretty early. Here we are in early June, and it's looking real good. And it'll pretty much bloom all summer long.
Okay, well that's a great quality. I know a lot of people like the annual or the tender fountain grasses. The purple fountain grass comes to mind, and there's also a pink that looks very similar to this, but again, they're not hardy. But this is a great hardy grass for the garden. I think very attractive. Carly Rose Oriental fountain grass. Well, back here, Olen, I see you have a number of different lantana. And by looking at the size of these, I would guess these are perennial lantana?
Yes, indeed. This is a cultivar called Zen Orange, and we just whack it back to the ground every early spring. And when it warms up, as you know, they like warmer temperatures, and it just comes to life and just blooms all summer. Really attracts the butterflies.
Okay, and I know sometimes I see some of the perennial lantanas and they look kind of gangly, they just don't look that attractive in the garden, but maybe the key is to just cut them back real hard in the spring. Just treat them like a perennial and let them grow out, and they're much more compact.
Yeah, that's what we do. As you noticed, we had 3 clumps here, and when by the end of the season they're growing out and pretty much touching each other, so that's how much it will grow. So you do need to take them back. And the other thing is, if you want to keep it in that location, it will take root as those branches touch the ground. It will layer itself. So to keep it where you want it, you need to cut those back or pull those up and give them away or whatever, relocate them.
Keep it a little more compact. Well, and you definitely like grasses. We've been here before, and you've talked about a number of the grasses, and I've even gone to presentations that you've given around the state where you've mentioned the ornamental grasses. And how many would you say you have here on your property, different types of ornamental grasses?
Oh, types I'm not sure, but I probably have 3 dozen cultivars of various grasses, because we do like them very much. As you mentioned, on a nice day like today, there's a nice breeze, and it really makes the grasses move and makes the garden come to life. So we're very fond of the grasses. This one right here we like especially because the very fine texture of the foliage.
Okay, which selection is this?
This is one called Yakujima.
Okay.
This is native to Japan.
A miscanthus?
Yes, miscanthus sinensis, and blooms later in the summer, but this nice gentle movement, nice what we call vase shape, which is not as apparent when the wind is whipping it over to one direction, but that just means it grows up and arches over beautifully.
Okay.
But
a great form.
The main thing I like about this is that nice fine texture, very narrow leaves.
Okay.
Miscanthus comes in all kinds of shapes, and this is one of our favorites.
Okay, adds a really neat texture to the garden. Well, in front of the grasses here, Olen, this is a beautiful container, that is made out of a bird bath.
Yes, it is.
Now, did you put this together?
Yes, we just made this in the last month or so. This is my wife Theresa's project.
Okay.
She wanted to do this. She had seen a picture in a gardening magazine and thought it looked cool. So we put out the word to our friends and checked the habitat sale and everything, looking for a broken bird bath.
Okay.
So of course, you know, a planter has to drain. So
Sure.
you can't have a regular bird bath or the plants will drown.
Drown, yes.
Well, we couldn't find one, and you need a sort of a weird bird bath. Most bird baths are actually not made correctly. A bird has to have a shallow bird bath. And for fashion purposes, they're usually made way too deep, and they make them fancy, and we found this one.
Okay.
So we said, hey, that's it. And it was pretty modestly priced. So we actually bought a new bird bath, drilled holes in it for drainage, and then she planted it up.
Okay.
And for ornament, we made this little gewgaw here, which is just barrel staves off an old whiskey barrel.
Okay, just the rings around the barrel?
Yeah,
Okay.
and they're 3 different sizes, of course, because a barrel is graduated, so they nest
Sure.
inside each other. So they're bolted together at the bottom and the top, and just put a little finial on top, and it looks like you knew what you were doing, whether you did or not. We
Well,
like rust in the garden, as you might tell.
Yeah, great color in the garden. You definitely look like you know what you're doing putting this together. Got some million bells in here in a little terracotta pot. And Olen, I've noticed around the garden you have lots of artwork. You guys love the garden whimsy, and I think you tastefully put it in different places in the garden. And out in the center of the lawn, you've got these large barbed wire spheres. Now, did you purchase those, or were those easy to make?
Well, we didn't purchase them. We like to make our own garden ornament as much as we can. And as I mentioned, we really like rust. So we saw that idea in another garden many years ago, and it was on the to-do list for a long time. And finally, this last summer, we got around to actually giving it a try. Came across some barbed wire, quite a bit of it actually, and it was mine for the taking. So I said thank you very much and brought it home, and Theresa and I experimented with it a little bit, and we managed to make 3 different size orbs out of barbed wire.
Okay.
So,
And whenever you mow the lawn, just roll them to the
yeah,
side?
that's the cool thing. They just roll out of the way.
All right, very nice. Well, let's look at a few more plants.
Okay, let's go.
Another way to incorporate planting beds into your property is the use of island beds. And the Thomases have a number of large island beds here in their property. And we're talking about an island of plants in a sea of lawn. And Olen, at the end of this long, narrow island bed, is an interesting take on the bottle tree yard ornament like we have at our studio garden. And instead of a tree, you've taken some blue glass bottles and just mounted those on some rebar stakes here in this part of the garden.
That's true. We do like glass as ornament in the garden, and this is an inexpensive way to do it. Just put out the word to your friends and neighbors that you're collecting wine bottles, and they'll come through for you. Now, the choices are really immense, so we strictly use blue in the garden because we like that blue color with all the other colors in the garden. And the blue glass predominates in the German section of the wine store if you want to try this at home.
Okay, very, very attractive here in the garden. And the little rose here that goes so well with that blue color?
Yeah, that's a cultivar called the Fairy, a very tough little guy. Little clusters of smallish roses. It just blooms all summer, pest-free and disease-free.
Okay. Well, another pink flowering plant is this huge clump of crinum bulbs that we've got right here, and you've had this here in your garden for several years.
Yeah, it was here when we moved here, and I didn't know what it was. I've since learned it was an old-fashioned plant called milk and wine lily because of that color there. And from examining the flowers and doing a little research, I believe that this is the hybrid, a cultivar called Palii,
Okay.
And it's actually a very large bulb. When I first dug it up, I was surprised to find bulbs that big.
As big as your forearm.
Yeah, and
that's
I do divide it
size.
every 5 or 6 years because the clump gets a little bit thick and will not bloom as list. But you can see many scapes, and then each scape is just covered with 5 or 6 flowers. So it's very floriferous and will bloom all summer.
Very showy right now, and that's interesting, the milk and wine colors in the flower. Well, right down here we've got a really tough perennial as well. This is one of the cat mints, and plant in the mint family, beautiful lavender colored flowers and silvery foliage. And when you're looking for these plants, Olen, there's a specific group of cat mints that you want to have for your garden?
Yeah, you be sure and want to get a hybrid. So when you read the name, you look for that little X in the name. That means it's a hybrid, and the result of that is, not besides being a better plant, it's sterile. The old-fashioned kind of plants would just reseed all over the place and take over, so you wouldn't want to grow them. But the sterile hybrids will bloom all summer. They're completely trouble-free. Okay. And you might look for the Walker's Low, which is the perennial Plant Association Plant of the Year that's in the stores right now. It's a little bit misleading by the name Walker's Low. It's not actually low, it's more of an upright one, not as small as this one, but it is a very nice plant, has slightly larger flowers, a bigger plant overall, and blooms all summer. Very nice.
Okay, so Walker's Low, a perennial Plant of the Year selection for the cat mint. Well, right down here I see you have one of the true Husker Red penstemons, and I can tell that because of the beautiful wine red color, plant developed by the University of Nebraska, hence the name Husker Red, and plants that sometimes are propagated by seed instead of vegetatively, and we get some that have green leaves, but you've got one of the true Husker Reds with that really dark color, so good to see that. Well, this is another really showy perennial we've got in this part of the garden, Olen. We just talked about yarrow on our program not very long ago, and this is a very attractive perennial yarrow. Which one is that?
Yeah, this, as you mentioned, there are many yarrows to choose from, as you featured on the show last week, and this one is called Moonshine because of the pale yellow color, and the other feature is this really silvery foliage that really makes it light up in the garden. And it's very floriferous, as you can see, and this is Theresa's favorite, so we have it in many locations of the garden. It makes a nice statement.
Okay.
It'll go by in a couple of weeks as these heads brown out, and we'll come in and shear it back by half, and then it'll put on another flush of this silver foliage and look good all summer long.
Okay, hard to beat those perennials that have both showy flowers and showy foliage.
That's the way I see it.
Well, speaking of showy foliage, this is definitely a foliage plant worth planting in the landscape. This is one of our native perennials, the cup plant. And Olen, can you tell us why it gets its name cup plant?
Well, it's because of the shape of the leaves. As you can see, the stem just grows right through the leaf, and you can see a little drop of water in there because the heavy dew or rain will collect in there, and hence you could get a little drink of water there if you really needed one and you were desperate. So this is Silphium perfoliatum. The species perfoliatum just describes that leaf.
Okay.
The way that's shaped and grows around the stem.
Okay, definitely an attractive plant.
Very attractive. It's pest-free, a nice wall of green right now. It blooms in late July. This is a summer bloomer, and has the sunflower type flower, and will get quite large actually, so that's why it's back here in the back, sort of.
Okay.
And we leave the seed heads for the birds to eat throughout the winter. It's very attractive, a winter.
Got to be thinking about those birds.
Absolutely.
Well, and thank you so much for giving us a tour. Really enjoyed looking around your garden. It looks really good.